Coming up on Network Africa. Incumbent President Paul Kagame wins Rwanda's elections by landslide with almost 99.1% of the vote. UN Children's Agency says at least 50,000 displaced by violence seeking refuge in Sudan's town of Kagame floods. At least one person dead as police fire live ammunition to protesters in Nairobi, Kenya. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Rwanda, where President Paul Kagame is on course to extend his 24-year rule by another 5 years in a landslide victory. With about 79% of the votes counted, Mr. Kagame has garnered 99.15%. Mr. Kagame, who has led the country since 1994, faced minimal opposition from Frank Habineza of the Democratic Green Party and independent candidate Philippe Mpayimana, who he overwhelmingly defeated in 2017. Frank Habineza had 0.53%, while former journalist and government advisor Philippe Mpayimana had 0.32% of the vote. Well, the president has thanked Rwandans for their trust in an address at his Rwandan Patriotic Front headquarters. The full provisional results are due by July 20th and the final ones by the 27th of this month. Joining us on the program to talk about this landslide victory is the VOA's Africa correspondent and Nairobi bureau chief, Mariama Diallo, who is in Kigali, the Rwandan capital. Hello, Mariama. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, hey, Olayo, and thanks for having me once again.
I mean, the elections are over. Paul Kagame has won with over 99% of votes. No surprise there. Was there dancing in the streets to celebrate his victory?
I actually happened to be at the National Electoral Commission when those results were being announced. I think most of the people who were in attendance were staff and also journalists sitting there watching basically the chairwoman of the National Electoral Commission make those announcements. And right after the announcements, actually, she held a presser for some of the media because she gave those results in Kenya, Rwanda. And, a lot of the journalists speak other languages. So she made sure that she followed up with the presser so that people like us and other people who don't speak Kenya, Rwanda can ask their questions. And she can also repeat the results in English.
Now, majority of the Rwandan people do love President Kagame and did want him to return to power as their president. What about the few, who voted for the opposition? I mean, there is almost no reporting from their point of view.
Well, that's a very good point. And to be honest, I would even tell you that it's hard to report on it after the elections, even during the elections, when you were at the polling stations trying to interview people and seeing if somebody out there can tell you that they are voting for one of the opposition candidates. It was very hard to do. And from, our contacts here and people that we have here, and we would ask, how come? And they would say, it's just not going to be easy for you to find somebody, who's going to tell you that they are voting for one of the independent candidates. But I have to say, though, during the campaign rallies, when I traveled to Gicumbi, an hour and a half away, about 2 hours from Kigali, to participate in one of the opposition candidates' rally, the Democratic Green Party candidate, Frank Ebenezer, I was able to find one or two people who stood there and told us that they would be voting for Mr. Ebenezer, and then they gave us the reasons why. So I think it was easier to find some people at a rally that was for an opposition leader than when you were actually there at the voting stations for people to tell you who they're voting for. But that's okay as well, because the vote is also a secret act. So usually we would ask the question as to, you don't have to tell us who you're going to be voting for, but you can at least tell us the issues and what kind of person do you want to see lead Rwanda in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, basically, who do you want to be the next leader of Rwanda?
Indeed. Well, the Rwandan electoral system, has been criticized by many countries, but you were on ground and you observed. What aspects did you observe that helped ensure a smooth process?
Well, from the polling station that I covered, I have to say, I watched, obviously, and how the process was going. It seemed pretty smooth. I also asked, because I wasn't voting, I did ask the voters, how did it go? I asked this mom who said to me that she wanted to make sure she was first in line to vote, to make sure her vote would be counted, but also that she had a baby at home and that she needed to go back home. She didn't want to wait too long in line. And she told me, she said there was no stress. They waited a little bit. They were patient. The lines were a little bit long here and there, but she was able to vote very, very smoothly. I was in the room where President Kagame was actually supposed to vote. And just one thing, I think his family, he came in and voted with his wife. But for example, his sons, I think two of the sons came at different times, and they had to wait in line as well and wait for their turn to come in and vote. So at least for the voting process, I also interviewed an international observer, actually, and asked him the same questions about were the ballots ready, just his judgment, his assessment of how the process has gone. And he was very positive about how the process went, and that the material got there, on time. He didn't really observe anything that was abnormal. But that was just, again, one polling station where I participated in.
All right, Malaria. Well, Kagame now gets a fresh 5-year term under the new constitution. What do the people expect from him, from his government this time around?
I think a lot of people that we spoke to, obviously, his supporters give him a lot of credit. They think that he's developed the country, he's brought peace, he's brought stability, and they want that to continue. And that's the reason why they voted for him. For the people that we talked to think that he's been around just too long. He's been in Rwandan politics since 1994. Yes, he wasn't president, but he's the one who kind of stopped the genocide, and he occupied various offices such as vice president, minister of defense, and before becoming president. So he's all they've known, and they also want somebody else to be given the chance to participate in developing the country, in helping move it forward. Some young people that I interviewed talked about jobs, for example. They said that at that point they didn't tell me who they were voting for, but they said they want the next leader to really think about jobs, because the youth a big percentage of the population of Rwanda, they're young. So they graduate, they get out of college, and they want to work. So I've had also people like that telling me that's what they want to see change. Just to talk about one of the candidates, actually, and their manifesto, Philip actually had a whole 50-point kind of program that he wanted to develop. He touched on many industries, from agriculture to fishing, education, health, industries where he also would like to make a difference if he was elected.
All right, then finally, Mariam, was it safe, for you covering these elections?
Yes, I mean, for me, listen, everything has gone smoothly. I've been here since last week, and I've interacted with other reporters, and I haven't really heard, anybody talking about, any kinds of, just being harassed or being denied information or anything like that. Yes, there are analysts that you call here and there who tell you, well, I'm not going to comment. But other people have been able to talk to us. I'm still here, so I guess if something happens between now and when I go back, I will definitely be happy to report on it. But so far, in all honesty, everything has gone smoothly.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Mariama Diallo.
Thank you for having me, Layo.
Let's move over to the crisis in Sudan now. Approximately 50,000 people are seeking refuge in Khartoum in eastern Sudan, with authorities saying and expecting even more in the coming days. Many have been displaced more than once since the war began in the country in the year 2023. According to the UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, the program coordinator says at least 400 children were registered at an internally displaced center up until July 9th. War erupted in Sudan between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, over the integration of the forces into a transition to free elections.
This is a temporary child-friendly spaces. So far, 400 children have been registered here, of which they are receiving several services, including mental and psychosocial support, case management, family tracing and reunification, as we have seen many of the children and families are missing their loved ones here. We are also doing a number of recreational activities to support the children, relieve the trauma of the travel they had, the long journey. As you can see here, we have the children doing sports. Inside there, we have children also doing some drawings and also talking to the social workers.
These are pictures from today in Kenya, Kitengela, Kenya. At least one person has been killed in renewed anti-government protests, even as police clashed with demonstrators that are demanding that President William Ruto step down. In the Kitengela town, and that's on the southern outskirts of the capital, Nairobi, police opened fire on protesters who threw rocks, burned tires, and chanting, "Ruto must go." Nationwide protests that broke out a month ago against proposed tax hikes have continued even after the president withdrew the legislation and also fired almost all of his cabinet. Now, activists are also demanding a systemic change to clean up corruption and poor governance in the country. According to the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, at least 50 people have been killed in the protests up to date. The top United Nations official for Somalia has visited its federal member state of Puntland, discussing a range of local and national topics with the leader, President Said Abdullahi Mohammed. In relation to Puntland, efforts at improving security and lowering tensions figured prominently in the discussions. The UN Secretary General's acting special representative for Somalia, James Swan, he gives a breakdown now of the ground that was covered.
The President and I discussed his government's continued focus on advancing development priorities and responding effectively to humanitarian needs. UN efforts support the Puntland Development Plan, which is in turn aligned with the Somali National Development Plan and UN Sustainable Development Goals. Humanitarian aid provided through the UN includes extensive support to address food insecurity, health needs, and the requirements of internally displaced persons, among many other activities. In my meeting today with President Denny, we discussed the security situation, and I commended Puntland authorities for their efforts in containing terrorist groups in Bari region and for working to de-escalate clan conflicts over land disputes in Mudug region. The renewed incidents of piracy and the impact of continued migration flows also require attention. I welcome preparations by the Puntland Electoral Commission and the population of Nugal region for the start of the campaign for direct local elections, scheduled for 23 July in the 3 remaining districts, including Garowe.
Welcome back to the program. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, is charging members that everyone can contribute to create a world that works for all humanity. Well, she was reading a statement on behalf of the UN Secretary General at the informal plenary meeting in New York to celebrate Nelson Mandela International Day. Nelson Mandela International Day is observed annually on his birthday, July 18th, when people everywhere are encouraged to volunteer 67 minutes of public service, one for each year Nelson Mandela fought for justice, either in their communities or virtually. This year's theme is "It is still in our hands to combat poverty and inequity."
Nelson Mandela showed us the extraordinary difference one person can make in building a better world. And as the theme of this year, Nelson Mandela's International Day, reminds us, combating poverty and inequality is in our hands. Our world is unequal and divided. Hunger and poverty are rife. The richest 1% are responsible for the same quantity of planet-wrecking greenhouse gases as 2/3 of humanity. These are not natural facts. These are the result of humanity's choices, man-made choices, and we can decide to do things differently. We can choose to eradicate poverty. We can choose to end inequality. We can choose to transform the international economic and financial system in the name of equity. And we can choose to fight racism, respect human rights, combat climate change, and create a world that works for all humanity. Every one of us can contribute through actions large and small. I joined the Nelson Mandela Foundation in urging everyone to perform 67 minutes of public service on Nelson Mandela International Day, 1 minute for each year he fought for justice. Together, let's honor Madiba's legacy and turn our hands towards building a better world for all.
As climate change continues to wreak havoc globally, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasizes the urgent need to strengthen adaptation systems and accelerate the decarbonization process to combat climate change. President Ramaphosa was making these remarks at the Pretoria National Treasury Climate Resilience Symposium 2024. The 3-day gathering held under the theme "Moving the Needle on Climate Change and Just Transition, the Role of the National Treasury," focuses on addressing these critical issues.
It is critical that we strengthen systems for adaptation and mitigation and build resilience in communities and accelerate our decarbonization effects and the pace of the just energy transition. The reality that we must confront is that the carbon intensity of our own economy is not sustainable. For decades, our reliance on fossil fuels as a source of energy was in many ways a competitive advantage because it allowed us to produce electricity cheaply, and it also allowed us to industrialize at a very, very fast pace. But the world has changed, and this dependency has come to pose significant risks for us. As the world moves towards greener economies, our trading partners will take measures to ensure that their own climate actions do not undermine their economies.
Meanwhile, business leaders, policymakers and stakeholders have gathered in Johannesburg for the Nedbank Manufacturing Roundtable under the theme Reinvigorating South African Manufacturing Through Localization and Business Empowerment. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa was there and filed this report.
In a quest aimed at cultivating a robust manufacturing industry and empowering businesses within the sector, leaders gathered for the Manufacturing Roundtable with the hope to address challenges and explore opportunities for growth and innovation within South Africa's manufacturing industry. The discussion was centered around promoting localization for economic growth. CFO of Mesita, Ngati Sampande, says localization should be accompanied by skill.
All these conversations cannot happen without the skills conversation. So you heard my first comment. I was actually excited that we were brought into the conversation because usually the skills topic is usually after the fact. Now it's very important that as we plan for the skills of the future, sitters are brought into the confidence in terms of what is required.
With the new government of national unity in place, Beth Deltry, head of policy and regulation affairs at the National Association and Automobile Components, emphasizes the importance of policy stability.
It's absolutely critical. Look, I think the automotive industry has been a big beneficiary of DTIC and government support. We have a really good policy program called the APDP2 program. And keeping that in place, keeping that stable is critical for investor confidence. APDP, the importance of it can't be underplayed. It's been such a critical backbone to so many business cases for not just the OEMs, but for my constituency, the component manufacturers.
Njambo Lekoba, managing director at NL Consulting, asserts that to achieve progressive localization, it is essential for the African continent to have a unified agenda.
Look, we know one thing, manufacturing creates jobs, but then it also needs to be backed up by a country agenda to say what are the sectors that we're going to be focusing on, what can we do best as a country, and we focus on doing that.
Business leaders, policymakers and stakeholders at the Nedbank Manufacturing Roundtable are hopeful for new opportunities within the industry. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
To health matters now, workers in Côte d'Ivoire have begun administering malaria vaccinations to children in the country. It becomes the first to start rolling out the newest shot targeting malaria in an effort that aims to cover about 250,000 children under the age of 2. The 3-dose vaccine, known as R21 Matrix M, was developed by Britain's Oxford University and was authorized by the World Health Organization last October. A different malaria vaccine called Mosquirix was endorsed by the WHO in 2021, but that requires 4 doses and protection wanes within months. India's Serum Institute has already made 25 million doses of the Oxford vaccine and says it plans to make at least 100 million each year. Now, malaria is a leading cause of death in children under 5 years old. The United States government has signed educational partnerships with 3 Nigerian universities, a historic feat happening as the partnership between Lagos and Atlanta turns 50 this year. The event took place at the University of Lagos, Akoka, and was attended by Spelman College President and member of the U.S. President's Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement, Dr. Helen Gale. Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, Professor Folashade Ogunshola, Dean of the School of Management and Social Sciences at the Pan-Atlantic University, Dr. Olushola Oni, and Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the Lagos State University, Professor Adenike Boyo. In her address, Dr. Gale says the diaspora has always been central to students' educational development, especially historically black colleges and universities, while the VC of the University of Lagos says knowledge sharing with other universities will help speed development.
I think it is opportunities like this that really help to catalyze these kinds of partnerships and lead to the important trust and understanding that makes sure that these partnerships don't just start by signing an agreement, but they become actual living documents that I think all of us will look back on in years to come and realize that we have made a real contribution, not only to furthering our partnership as Africa and the diaspora, but also for making sure that our young people and the next generation have what they need to make their contribution to our world.
We have a young and teeming population, and it's very clear that the future requires innovation. It requires a lot of change. It's going to have a lot of change. And if we're going to move fast, we need to tap into what our friends are doing. We need to be part of the global community. And part of this is recognizing that we have a lot to share from the African continent, but we also have a lot to learn. And so today marks a very, very important beginning for collaboration across between the universities in Lagos and the diaspora.
That's where we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.